Okay, the freezing might have been my virus thing running.
Fair.
It's just popped up an alert.
Ooh. Looks like Restream is not letting me use the live studio, so it doesn't. I might not be able to do the chat thing after all.
Nah, I got it. Okay, that was weird. Like 10 seconds later, I heard what we could have.
Hello and welcome to the Fresh Air Sci-Fi Show. I'm Joe.
And I'm Dave.
And, oh, blimey. It feels like it's been forever again. And these weekends are getting too long, Dave. It is Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
Man, I wish we had the time to do a stream over the weekend as well.
It all just feels like one long day to me with the lack of sleep I'm getting.
Oh, man. I'm sorry to hear that. How's your weekend, though? Did you get up to much?
No, not that I can remember.
Well, that's great. Did you get much study going or anything?
No, I was too tired. Yeah, I'm a few days behind because I just can't focus or anything.
What are you currently studying?
Operating systems.
Ah, fair. Any particularly interesting ones?
The math module. Well, it's the Raspberry Pi Linux.
Oh, nice. Very nice. So you're going to be doing much programming on it, or is it about setting it up or anything like that?
It's about setting it up and using virtual machines and deploying, clients and things like that.
Ah, fair. I've just been testing out a couple of bits as we've set up the stream, and it seems that I can sort of get this to work. If I go into the actual live studio. So now you can see on time, Tuesday and Thursday, 8:30 p.m. GMT. That's 3.3 p.m. Eastern. Apparently I can't spell. It's supposed to be 3:30.
There we go. Yeah, it's just popped up now.
Excellent. So look, you can put our little Twitter thing up there. So, look at that. Fancy. Trying to do a couple of things. And Dave, don't worry, I didn't forget you. I've got you up there as well. So not only the Answers in Reason Twitter account, but your personal account. So for anyone who is actually not able to see because you're listening to the podcast on the rerun, that's at Answers in Reason and at TrolleyDave1971 if you want to follow either of us on Twitter. So I've been trying a couple of different things. In fact, there was something else I was supposed to set up as well, which was supposed to be the chat feature. So there's a chat feature that I think I need to leave running in the background to start things. But I don't know if you remember a little while ago, I tried to set up something so that when we did a Be Right Back, people could request a video or something like that, and it can just play through a series of videos rather than a preset list. Well, the reason it didn't do that is because I didn't have this chatbot installed on the computer, and I forgot to start it before the stream. So, yeah. Silly me. But yeah, so I've turned that on as well, and there are a few commands that we can try. There's certain games and things like that you can try in there as well. It's all a bit weird for me, but it's just some additional things that we can do when we're on stream, especially when we're doing maybe our end of month AMAs. We can have certain games in there, like there's one that's supposed to be a mini heist, and there's supposed to be ones where you can duel each other and things like that. So I don't really know how any of it works at the moment. I am just having a little bit of fun with it all and seeing how it goes, but I will spend some time and maybe put something out in our Discord so people can try it next time we are live. But for now, I am just going to leave it on in the background, although it does think that we're offline right now, which is weird, seeing as it's the same service that I'm using to broadcast currently. So maybe it's not a perfect system. Maybe it's not a system at all. So all right, so I'm gonna close that one, leave that open. So anyway, moving on to tonight's stream, as I'm sure you're all bored already of me just going on about nothing whatsoever.
There's only me here.
This is true. We do have a couple of stragglers, it looks like, who haven't joined the chat yet. There is someone watching us over on Twitter and stuff, and a couple more people have just joined. So hello to our new viewers. Please feel free to drop in and say hello into our chat. You've just missed it, but I'm messing around with a couple of new things tonight, and we're about to get onto the actual main event. So you haven't missed anything because I've just been blathering on. So might be one to cut out before the podcast. So tonight's yeah, well, yeah. I mean, if you didn't realise that we just blathered on endlessly and went on random tangents all the time, well, you should know that pretty soon, and you must like it if you keep coming back.
Hi. Plus, you know, we like it raw.
Oh yeah. So tonight's stream is carrying on from one that we did a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you caught the stream last time, but it was reviewing Criticism of Atheism, Episode 2, The Beginnings of Atheism by Haitham Talat, I think is how you spell his name, or say his name, should I say. And the video had a number of issues with it. I think we spotted 3 errors within the first 30 seconds. And he gave quite a poor view of Durkheim's arguments and things like that. There was a lot of bias in what he was saying. He didn't present the best argument. So what we are going to do tonight is check his next one in the series. Oh, and Dave, I worked out why you couldn't find the next one in the series. It's because he hasn't put it in the playlist. So he's got a playlist that he's started of these criticisms of atheism, and he only had episode 1 and 2 in it. He has got episode 3 up there. Now, this one tonight is, how did the universe begin, and were there physical laws before the universe? So it's possibly leaning more towards a scientific edge than a philosophical edge, and we might be a little bit more out of our depth than we usually are with tonight's stream, but hopefully we can answer some of the questions and things he puts forward. Also, if anyone has anything that they'd like to throw in there and comment on, please do. We are more than up for audience participation, as I'm sure you know. Participation? Participation. Talking's hard, man. And so I think basically we should get on with things and move things over. Now, tonight I don't even need to put things into Be Right Back, or at least I don't need to do it for as long as I usually do, because I've been a little bit organized. So I'm just going to switch things into Be Right Back just for a second, and we'll be right back with you. There you go. That wasn't that bad, was it? we basically got there in an okay time. Only kept you going for a few seconds. So, as I mentioned, this is Haitaim's Talat's English channel, and he does the criticism of atheism and how did the universe begin. And we're basically just going to be giving this a review tonight. Anybody who wants to join in, feel free to leave your comments in there. We'll try and keep our eye on them. And Dave, obviously, tell me if there's anything you want me to pause it as well.
Assalamu alaikum. Atheism is based on believing in nature.
Sorry, Dave?
Don't forget to put the subtitles on.
Ah, yes. Yeah, we did do that last time. Although he has put it sort of in there in the background anyway, but yeah, good shout.
Yeah, not for the whole thing.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, just for the main talking points.
Yeah, so atheism is based on believing in nature's capability of creation and generation. I mean, that's something we could probably start with right there, isn't it? You're not coming through, Dave. Sound check. Has your mic come undone again? We're real high tech, us.
Hello?
You're back. Excellent.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I can hear you now, dude.
Okay, nice one. Yeah, the cables must have come loose or something. I just jiggled them about and they seem to be okay now.
Ah, fair. Just blame the dog. It's usually him.
Yeah, it usually is. He's kind of right here in that if you believe in a godless universe, you have to believe in nature's ability to create all this. But not all atheists are naturalists, I guess you could argue.
Yeah, I mean, you could make an argument that for an atheist to be completely consistent, they ought to be some form of naturalist, materialist, etc., but not necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, you could go back to the sort of debate here that atheism is just a lack of belief in God. In that some atheists don't necessarily believe in a godless universe, they just don't believe in a God at the moment, but they haven't discounted it.
Yeah, and also it doesn't necessarily speak for other areas of the supernatural. There are plenty of atheists, especially lack of belief atheists, that do believe in certain supernatural things, or at least things that are somewhat beyond the physical, which is what we'd sort of attribute supernatural elements to. Now, in general, I think the average atheist doesn't, but I think saying it's based on believing that, I'm not sure that's the right way to phrase it. I think if you're
no, definitely not.
If you're consistent in atheism and you hold to atheism as gods do not exist, then he's probably got more of a point. But, language, especially on the internet, is not that clear, and people are very muddy things in themselves.
And the other thing here as well is this sort of makes it seem like atheists don't believe God exists because they believe everything is natural. But
yeah.
It's not believing everything is natural that makes them believe God doesn't exist or not believe in God.
It's more the other way around.
It's the other way around, yeah.
It's here's all the information about God and gods and various religions. We've looked at it. We don't find anything convincing about it. Some atheists are very focused on scientific evidence. Not all of us, though. But if they go, well, there's no scientific evidence to support that, but there is scientific evidence to support the world being natural. So again, he's going almost bottom up instead of top down. I think most atheists would end up at the conclusion that everything happened naturally, but not starting with that presumption. It's more of a case of, well, we've thrown out God, what else is there?
Yeah, pretty much. At least that's the way I think anyway.
The capability of creation and generation. They attributed everything to it. Nature is everything, as the agnostic Carl Sagan said. Thomas Huxley, Darwin's bulldog, as he liked to be called, was calling nature dim nature, the biggest idol that is worshipped by atheists instead of Allah is nature. The biggest idol in the history of human species.
I'm not sure atheists worship nature.
No, I mean, there are people who worship nature, though they're generally not regarded as atheists because they believe in the life force and Gaia and they deify nature. I don't think atheists tend to deify nature. There might be some that do, and there's some that deify science. But in general, yeah. Again, he's starting down false lines of thought. Again, he seems to be strawmanning the average atheist position.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I mean, you could even sort of argue here that even pantheists don't necessarily worship nature. They might see nature as, sort of like an attribute of God. God is in everything, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they worship nature.
No. I think worship's a very interesting way to put it as well, because there are theists that don't worship.
Yeah. He's looking at it through a very narrow religious lens. If you're not worshiping God, you're worshiping something else. Like a real binary sort of thought here, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I mean, we do experience that a lot online. I don't have many theistic debates and conversations anymore on the internet, but I will say that generally is how it goes. They can't imagine you not worshipping a god, so therefore you're worshipping science or you're worshipping nature, or atheism is a religion because they can't imagine not having a religion, and all these sorts of falsehoods come out.
Yeah, and I think judging by some of the words he's using here, he's saying it is, if you're not worshipping Allah, you're not worshipping the Creator, therefore you are committing some kind of shirk, or you must be worshipping something other than the actual thing you're supposed to be worshipping, so therefore you're worshipping an idol.
He seems to not actually be trying to critique atheism, is more being critical of atheism, and he doesn't seem to be trying to actually talk to atheists. He seems to be talking to his own tribe. And don't get me wrong, we see other atheists do that too. On the internet, you can get a very, very tribal place, and many of us do the same thing with the way that we might present arguments against religion for pats on the backs from other atheists. But it seems that he's not actually trying to have a conversation with atheists or learning what atheists think.
Yeah, and if he's creating these videos as an actual critique and as a way to actually convince atheists that they should be not being atheists and believing what he believes, he's doing a very bad job, because if you're not actually criticizing what the people believe, then how are you going to actually convince them?
Oh, definitely. I mean, how often do we have it when I know we talk about the definition of atheism, and we have a preferred definition, but when a theist even starts down that route, well, atheism means this, and it's like, yeah, fair enough. Okay, we agree with the definition that it's the belief gods do not exist, but there are many atheists that don't, and instantly they've gone in assuming exactly what every atheist might believe, and that starts the conversation on a semantic battle. And this is also going that step further. It's not just discussing one aspect of what atheism means, is actually going into the fact that, worshipping nature. I mean, God, how many of you atheists out there actually worship nature? I mean, feel free to let us know in the comments or anywhere. I'd be interested. If there is an atheist that worships nature, I'd love to have a chat with you. And I'd like to know why. And if it is genuine worship, like someone worships a god, or you just think it's pretty fab.
I think he's just watched The Wicker Man too many times. Also, while we're on a quick pause, hello, Chris.
Hey, Chris, nice to have you here.
Yeah.
He's having a great evening listening to us, apparently. I hope you're having a beer and enjoying your night, and you're going to enjoy this video. Feel free to put any of your critique in as well if you like, Chris.
I was going to say, I hope he's seen a doctor for that affliction. If he's sitting here listening to us having a great time, then there's something wrong there.
Maybe he's drunk.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Believe. Atheism is idolatry that attributes to the materialistic nature the capability of creation, generation, and arrangement. Dr.
Do you want to pause that?
Yeah.
Okay, you kind of do as an atheist. If you believe in a godless universe, let's stick with our kind of atheism for the moment. If you believe in a godless universe, you have to sort of believe in the ability for nature to create things and arrange matter through laws, etc., etc. But the way he's put that, it makes it sound like, well, we have no good reason to believe that, when we actually see like the accretion of planetary disks, and we see babies form in the womb, we see plants grow up from the ground, we see all kinds of different things happening in nature. A rainfall is created within nature itself, and it's an arrangement of matter by nature. Is he saying that everything that happens, God puts his personal touch on?
Also, I mean, is it fair to even say it's a form of idolatry in that regard anyway?
Definitely not. It's not fair at all, because when it rains, I don't go out and say, oh, thank you, nature, praise be, blessed be the fruit of the loom.
Yeah. So realistically, again, he's coming in and not actually presenting things in a fair way. If he came in and said, well, atheists tend to believe this sort of thing, and I don't accept it because then that might be a better way to present it. But he seems to just, again, be preaching to the crowd he's already got, not actually interested in having a dialogue with other atheists and learning about their beliefs and what they think.
Yeah. Also, hello, Steen. Steen's joined us.
Hello.
And what looks like John Maddox has joined us. I think that's his profile picture there.
Hey, John. Nice to have you here.
His comment is, strict materialism is approaching sheer lunacy. The required level of denial to avoid the obvious is staggering. Atheists relying on materialism crack me up.
So what's his alternative in that regard?
Oh, he's given a thumbs up, so that means it must be John Maddox.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you mean by fully relying on materialism. If you've gone through a godless universe, I'd probably say closer to naturalism. And I know they're similar. I just feel like naturalism allows for a little bit more nuance than pure materialism. But if we were to say that we are in a godless universe, that there is no supernatural, what more is there than nature? What is your take on that? I'd be willing to have the conversation with you and learn a bit more about a different point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a strict materialist, so.
Said, the atheist climbed the mountain of sophistry, and while he was about to reach the highest peak of sophistry, he was intercepted by the last rock. After he went up, he found a group of idolaters sitting before him in the same place for centuries. Atheism believes...
Okay, you want to pause that?
Yeah, I was getting it.
Yeah, go back to the actual thing where you can see the whole thing. I'm guessing it's sort of an attempt to say that modern atheists have climbed to the peak of bad logical arguments, and just as they were about to reach the peak of those bad but logical sounding arguments, he found a bunch of people that had been making the same arguments for centuries. Nobody's denying that materialism or physicalism or naturalism or anything like that is new. Its popularity is probably relatively new, but like you can find arguments for it in the Greeks.
Yeah.
And also calling them idolaters again.
Yeah, again, he's going on the attack rather than going a little bit too far, really, isn't he? I mean, I do think there is more than purely physical things, like we've had our conversations about the mind. It may be an emergent property of physical properties of the brain, that is, but it's not a wholly physical thing. Which is why I wouldn't say I was a physicalist in that regard. But yeah, I don't know. Again, as you said, he's going on the whole idolaters thing. Again, he's not trying to have a conversation. He's telling people what they believe, and he's obviously preaching to a crowd.
Yeah. Like you say, I think that's what these videos are mostly designed for. It's kind of not a circle jerk as such, but sort of, hey, my crowd, look at how smart we are. We don't idolize nature. And look at how bad these people are. They idolize nature instead of Allah, the one true creator. But, there's a few problems with Allah.
I think there's more than a few problems with Allah and most religions in that regard, and the claims within the various holy books. I'd love someone to actually be able to present a coherent case for a supernatural being. And I mean, to be honest, I find a simulated universe more convincing, and I don't think that's true either.
Yeah.
Centuries. Atheism believes in the power of nature, but it was...
I mean, again, he's going down this path again.
Yeah. And I mean, you do kind of have to believe in the power of nature. If you're going to believe in a godless universe, you have to be able to believe that it is possible for nature to do all the things that we see around us.
At least if you're going to be consistent. But as we've experienced, many of us atheists are not actually consistent in our beliefs.
Yeah.
Discovered that the nature has a beginning and not self-sufficient. So how can you consider it as everything?
So, I mean, it depends on what he means there by nature has a beginning.
I'm guessing he's talking about the Big Bang being the origin of all space-time.
So, in that regard, Yeah, that's fine. I mean, if that is actually what he's talking about, yeah, that was the start of our universe as we know it. Then
I'm going to guess he considers
that there was nothing before.
Hello?
Oh yeah, you cut out and in, but don't worry. Yeah, he's considering that there was nothing before. I mean, I think it's in that regard. I think we could say that there was probably something. It's just our universe is close to 14 billion years old, and from that point. So just gonna read a couple of comments before we come on from logical, plausible, probable. He says that if materialism and or naturalism are false, then the only plausible counter is an external intelligent agent is necessary. This goes on to say, however, when we look at is recognized as necessary for our existence, then it makes more sense that a theistic God is a more probable conclusion. I mean, how would you support that it's the more probable conclusion there? And then he says, he's talking about my statement. Let's think about your statement. If simulation is true, then an external agent is 100% required. I agree with that. I mean, if we do live in a simulated universe, then of course we need an external agent. It would be like this universe is God, but it wouldn't necessarily be a God in the same way that we might be like the Sims. We're not actually their God. It's just we have the control over them and we can turn them off at a click of a switch, but we're not actually gods in that regard. So Chris has also commented saying, I sure don't hope there's any external intelligent agent, since I personally can't really wrap my head around what's the purpose for this existence. I suppose that depends on the particular external agent you believe in, though, Chris. There are, within certain religions, it basically tells you what the existence is. That's why you've got your whole reward system within certain religions, your reward and punishment system. If it's a simulated universe, maybe it's simply just to run tests and see how certain things would work in practice. But I mean, I don't really know. I mean, there's plenty of reasons we could do it. The number of times we've thought about testing ethical theories, and we can't ethically test ethical theories in the real world. So the only way we could really test them would be to build a simulation in the computer, but we'd also need to build people that were, intelligent enough and responded the way that real agents did actually respond to certain situations, with the different ways that people think about things and different ways that they grow up. And then all of a sudden you could run 1 million different simulations, and that is how it goes. And you think about, well, it seems like this is taking over a long time, and a computer simulation would be really quick. Which, you're right, but think about having a dream. That seems like it goes on sometimes for ages, but it can be only a few seconds that happens in your brain. So, as I said, I don't really believe in simulation theory. I'm just saying different ways it could work. What we're experiencing could just be minutes in a computer program. So
we are the AI computer homework of a far more advanced civilization.
Yeah, we could be. But I don't see any decent reason to believe in a supernatural being. It does seem that things did happen through cause and effect over millions, if not billions, of years. And I mean, that seems to be the way it goes. But yeah. Anyway, let's carry on with the video that we're reviewing. We can come back to some of this other conversation after the show or at a later date. I'd love to have a conversation about this in more detail at a later date.
Yeah.
This universe emerged from no time, no space. Nature emerged suddenly, so it isn't eternal. Among physicists,
you want to pause that?
Yeah, I mean, nature didn't really. It wasn't suddenly, was it?
No, and not just that. I'm not absolutely certain it came from absolutely nothing.
No, that is often a presumption of theism. Like I said previously, I think that there seem to always be something, some form of energy. I think if you look back, when I was last reading up on it, and it's been a long while since I've looked into the current science on the creation of the universe. So, and creation here, not using as in it actually being created. But I apologize if what I'm saying is out of date thinking. But at the start, as in before the start of the Big Bang, there was just pure light in the universe in the form of photons. It had no mass or anything like that, and this energy formed matter and antimatter pairs, and something that we don't know what happened caused an imbalance, which caused an ongoing reaction of matter and antimatter cancelling each other out, and eventually we were left with more matter than antimatter, and that is why there is what there is in the universe. And over billions of years, through cause and effect, we've ended up with where we are today.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it, and I think there's enough problems in how we think about it that we can't necessarily say it was one or the other. Like, it could have appeared from absolutely nothing, but it seems unlikely. But if you posit that there was always something, then you have the infinite regress problem sort of thing. So there's problems, for me, there's problems in each worldview for the beginning of the universe.
Yeah, actually, there's something relative to that just popped up in the chat as well. So he says, I find it hilarious that atheists accept the point about time being relative, but somehow God being external to our time frame of reference in relation to time is somehow ridiculous. So sorry, we've had this conversation a few times before, and I'm trying to think of where we need to start on this particular comment, because there are different ways that some people mean this. Now, do you mean that God is outside of time? But then if God is outside of time, how can God affect time? God would, if something was timeless, as in outside of time, it wouldn't be able to do anything because movement and everything like that requires time, right?
Yeah.
And if you're saying that actually it's just an eternal being that was always there, then there was an infinite amount of time before he decided to go, there we go. Why suddenly 14 billion years ago did he go, right, now we're going to do this? It doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, that's one of my problems with the God thing, that God existed in a completely timeless, changeless state until he created the universe, and that alone causes problems for me in much the same way that saying that the universe existed in this timeless state causes for me.
So, Cafe says that atheists don't grasp what's meant by God being outside of time. It's not a sky daddy that's completely outside of the plume. Rather, it means God is inclusive of all space and time. But then if you say that, if God is inclusive of all space and time, then, okay, you're saying he's not as an external thing outside of time, but you've still got the problem of the infinite amount of time before he decided to do, start things off with the Big Bang. So why did he go, not yet, now? It doesn't make sense. Unless you're saying that time came into being with God at that moment in time. So before 14 billion years ago, there was also no God? Is that what you're trying to say? I'm really willing to try and understand what you're saying here, Cafe, but it doesn't necessarily seem to be that consistent. Atangelo says something cannot come from nothing. The universe cannot be eternal. We agree. The universe, as it stands right now, is not eternal, but there could have always been something, is what we're saying. You're saying something cannot come from nothing. If you're talking about a true nothing, I agree. If there was absolutely nothing, yeah, nothing. How can anything come from that? What we're saying is that there was always something. You would argue for an eternal God. Well, why can't there be an eternal universe? I accept that you believe in an eternal God. The problem is you have the infinite regress problem with an eternal God. So
yeah, and I'll just bring up something that Otangelo said as well. He said something cannot come from nothing. God existed in a different dimension. So that means that wherever
like
God,
flat world.
If there was absolutely nothing that existed, absolutely nothing, where was this other dimension? And if you say God is immaterial, so he doesn't need to exist anywhere, you're saying that God existed in absolute nothingness, which doesn't make any sense to me.
And I assume that he's not using dimension as in a dimension, a spatial dimension in that regard, like flat world or anything like that. He's using it as in an alternate universe.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, because I mean, but then he's also saying, as you mentioned, there wasn't ever nothing then in that regard. Or it seems like there's some very confused thoughts coming through here. But, you know. And
of course, here's another problem. You now have 3 theists arguing in the comments, 2 which are Christians, if I remember right. Otangelo and John are Christians, and Cafe, I'm not sure, but what he's arguing is something very different from what John and Otangelo are arguing.
Yeah. Holy crap. Do you even understand the point of the Kalam? Yes, I do. We've discussed the Kalam at length. It's logically valid, I'll say that. But it works on some presuppositions that I don't necessarily agree with. I'm happy to have a discussion about the Kalam again at some point, but that isn't necessarily the point of tonight's stream. So, yes, I do understand the point of the Kalam. It's basically an opening for an argument that has actually been shown to not necessarily be completely sound, even though it is logically valid. I am going to continue with the video, though.
Yeah.
Today, there is a consensus that the universe has a beginning. At a certain point, the matter of the universe emerged. Time and space emerged after.
I mean, this is along the lines of what I was saying before. Because there was no weight to the energy in the universe, the current laws of physics didn't exist. So that's why we didn't have time in the same way. I'd agree that there is a consensus that the universe in its current state did have a beginning, and that beginning was the Big Bang. What there isn't a consensus on is what exactly was there before that state. But the science does seem to be leaning towards the dense energy in the universe in photons.
Yeah.
Sorry, just one from Steen as well. If nothing can come from nothing, God created the universe from part of himself, or created something from nothing. That's a fair point. But I think you'd get the answer there saying that they'd probably say that the universe came from God. I mean, there's a bunch of theists there that can answer the question for you in the chat on what they specifically believe. But most of them believe in some form of eternal, timeless God. I don't want to put words into their mouth, though, and I will let you folks continue that conversation in the chat as we continue the video.
There was no time or space. This is a scientific consensus. Here was the biggest trouble for atheists. The famous atheist Arthur Eddington said, "The notion that the universe has a beginning is repugnant to me." The beginning of the universe pushed many atheists all over the world to put many assumptions to justify the sudden emergence of the universe. The sudden emergence with such precision and constants. They said there may have been...
Sorry, did you want to jump in there?
I don't know who Arthur Eddington is.
He's very famous, but we don't know who he is.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I probably should have looked that up.
I haven't watched this video before, so I had no way of looking it up. But again, he's talking about the beginning of the universe, and again, the current state of the universe as we know it, as we experience it. Yes, there was a beginning, but the bit before that, it's generally, I think, accepted by scientists that there was this energy in the universe.
Physical laws before...
Sorry, Dave.
It's all right. There's lots of various theories going on at the moment, and I sort of remain undecided on most of them. I'm not smart enough.
It's quite funny that, again, he's seemingly going down just a single line that suits him for this video.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of like an overly long column arguing for a first cause.
Our universe. Allah says in the Quran, and they have already disbelieved in it before, and would assault the unseen from a place far away. As a result of their disbelief, they guess the unseen without proofs or evidences.
Isn't that what he's doing with Allah?
Yeah, I mean, I hate the not evidence thing, because I would agree that various holy books are a form of evidence for that particular religion or God or etc. I know many atheists will say it's not evidence, but actually we have a lot more to base what we're going on by the evidence around us. Yes, there is a certain bit that we go, right, we're stuck here. We think it could be this, or this. But we've got back to this point and we've managed to see it. And what you've done is gone, well, this book says this, so that's what it is.
Yeah. And I mean, with something like the Quran, you have to ignore a bunch of problems with it in order to say that this is the answer.
I mean, I know we've covered a few off in a previous stream where we covered off, is the Quran perfect? And you managed to demonstrate ways that it is not perfect. But can you think off the top of your head a couple of other big issues with the Quran?
The embryology part. There's people who would argue that it's taken from Galen, like a really crude form of Galen, his embryology. Mountains as pegs, so they're stuck down into the ground rather than coming up from the ground. There is a whole bunch of problems with it. I mean, we could probably do a stream on it at some point, but I'm very tired and my brain is quite mushy tonight. There's things like, how could Muhammad have known such and such a thing when, the Arabs were a trading center, so he could have overheard things.
Yeah, like the seas.
The seas meeting, and yeah. And going on about this, yes, okay, you can say, well, look, okay. We don't seem to know what happened before it, but the arguments that we have against, say, the Quran or the Bible or what have you, those arguments don't stem from this. You could admit not knowing anything about this, but still have criticisms about the arguments being made. Which is where he should focus if he wants to criticize atheism.
Yeah.
Any assumption to escape from religious arguments. The notion that there were physical laws before our universe is absurd, because there was nothing called before in nature. Before and
so, to our understanding, he's not necessarily wrong here.
No.
But we can't actually detect what happened. Like, even we can get really, really, really close to the beginning of the Big Bang, but we don't know much before. Even before that point, there's like the tiniest slither of time that happens as it was kicked off. And I do get what he's saying there, but there's still plenty of thoughts on what went on, and there are many that say that there was no before. There is the current state, of course, the last 14 billion years, yes, that is the start of the universe as we know it. But there are a number of different theories. I mentioned one, which is the energy in photon energy at the beginning of the universe and creating the matter and antimatter pair, so on and so on. There's still people that accept the bang crunch theory where everything constantly does that. I think that one's generally quite discounted, but there are still people that are convinced by that argument. There's many worlds, many universes, should I say. There's so many different things that people will say on it. He's saying that it's all an excuse to get out of religious arguments. Well, it's not our fault that every religious argument that is presented, all the different holy books that we are shown, are filled with so many errors and contradictions and false claims that actually it leaves us going, well, all of these aren't true, and what we can detect and what we can go on is all of this thing up until this point, and we all admit that we don't really know before this point, or even if there was a before this point. But what we can detect is this, and what we can focus on in this, and this is what there is actual evidence for, not a book that is filled with issues, right? If you had a friend and half of what he said just ended up being wrong, you wouldn't trust his opinion. That if he said, oh, by the way, this thing happened, you'd go, really? Right? And so if you read a holy book and it's full of problems and it says, oh, by the way, there's a God, you're going to go, really? And why would there be so many different holy books, so many different God claims? It's obviously he's talking about his particular God in this regard. His God is the creator God, and so on and so forth. But I think sometimes theists seem to forget that there are other gods that are claimed to exist, and other religions and other beliefs. Steen says what I've just said in the chat. Science doesn't say there was nothing before the Big Bang. It says it does not know what there was. And that's basically what I was saying. And people have different hypotheses about what that could be. And I mentioned a couple of different things. So, again, I think they're almost going along the wrong path. Atangelo's just said that, where is he? Science says the universe had a beginning. He's okay. Again, back to the same point. We're talking about the universe in the current state that we know it. Yes, that definitely had a beginning. That was the Big Bang. What we're saying is we don't know anything before that. You can fill that with God if you like. That's fine, right? But what we're saying is we haven't seen any evidence that's strong and convincing that supports that. And all the holy books and all the things like that have been presented to us are not convincing. They're full of holes and errors. So
we're also exactly the kind of things you expect to see in naturalism.
Sorry, say that again, Dave. You got muddled out there.
All the different holy books and all the different ideas about God and all that kind of thing is something you would expect to see under naturalistic views as well.
So again, there's nothing to convince us that these things that are asserted are true. And I get that you accept them, and that's fine. If you really want to have a conversation another time about this, then I'm fine to have that conversation with you. But I think you'd be better off trying to support a general idea of a god than the god of a particular holy book. Because there's too many holes in the various holy books. So
go deist or go broke.
And after, our world is related to time, and the universe emerged from no time, and therefore there is no before in the natural world. And let me ask, does the assumption that there were laws before our universe answers the question, what is the source of these laws? Who created this?
Okay, so it is instantly going on that someone had to create these laws. I mean, I think it's... Sorry, go for it, Dave.
If there's a law, there's a lawmaker.
Yeah. It's basically a bad form of the watchmaker argument, isn't it? If there's a creation, there's a creator. If there's a law, there's a lawmaker, you know. If there's a design, there's a designer.
There's a painting, there's an artist. Yeah.
These laws could be completely natural, and it seems most likely that they are. And I don't necessarily think the assumption that the laws, at least the laws that are in our universe, were there before the Big Bang, at least not in the same way. I don't know what there are. Again, we're back to not knowing because we don't know.
Yeah. I'm happy to hold my hands up here and say I don't know about these things. The laws could just exist naturally. We don't know enough to be able to really say anything at the moment. And again, it's by focusing on these, you don't focus, or, you know, the guy making the video, by focusing on these, he's not focusing on the actual criticisms that a lot of atheists have. No. Or a lot of the arguments that atheists have. He's focusing on a specific argument where he's like, well, you're ignorant of these things. If you're ignorant of these things and you can't answer these things, then you must believe my God.
Yeah, again, it's it seems to be going into the realms of God of the Gaps argument. You know, and you know what? Atangelo's doing the same. Atangelo's sort of doing the same thing within the chat. Is going, how do you know they're natural? I mean, it seems most likely that there are. We've both held up our hands and said we don't know. It just seems like there are. Our ignorance is unjustified. Really, your presuppositions are unjustified. Back at you. There's no reason for them to be. There's no reason for them to be. Really, there's. That's only because you're starting from the point that there definitely is a God.
These laws, who puts them into effect? The law of gravitation is a mathematical description of a particular event. It isn't the event itself. To make it clear, the law of gravitation explains to me the speed of the fall of this pen and the cause of its fall, but it doesn't explain to me where this pen came from. It didn't create the pen. So the law of gravity will not create a billiard ball. It only describes its movement. The new atheists assumed that the law of gravitation is sufficient to create a billiard ball, billiard stick, and billiard player.
I mean, this is a false equivalence. Go for it, Dave.
Yeah. They're not assuming that the law of gravitation is enough to create a billiard ball, because we know how billiard balls are created. We know that there's a process to it. And you can't then use that as an analogy to the beginning of the universe. I think it's Krauss who argues, or was it Hawking? He argued that all that's necessary for a universe to form is gravity.
I'm not sure, no. That does sound like something I read in Briefer History of Time, though, but it's been about 10 years since I read that.
Yeah, same. So he's making a bit of a false equivalency here, like you say. We do see gravity helping to form planets and planetary disks and things like that. And again, we don't know enough about how the universe formed to be able to say this is how it formed.
No, but there are a lot of things that we can track about how things that once the universe was started, how they formed, and they all formed naturally over millions of years, if not billions. And there's even work being done on the link between non-life and life, and how some cells that are considered not alive are starting, are acting more and more alive. And you can take from there, it was a TED talk, I can't remember who it was by, but it's actually a really interesting one, the link from non-life to life, that shows how there are cells that are considered not alive. I can't even remember what they're called. I should have done my research. Sure. But it shows how these things can start to emerge. And it doesn't take long to say, well, actually, over time, lots of things can happen. Planets form over time. Cells that start to search out other energy sources might need suddenly more and more energy sources, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I mean, we've gone back into the laws demand a lawgiver. I mean, that we'd already addressed that one. And Tangelo, you're starting from that point. The laws of physics do not demand a lawgiver. They're not something like the laws in a country where they are agreed on by a governing body of things that are legal and illegal. The laws, right, are descriptive statements, essentially. We detect this thing going on. We explain it by maths, like he was saying there. So therefore, using this is the law of X, this is the law of Y. Essentially, it's just describing the process. Now, does the process necessarily mean it needs a process maker? No, not necessarily. You're starting again with a precept. And I don't think you should go down that path.
Yeah. This is one of the reasons why when people say, is there any argument that doesn't sway you for God, but, lends credence to the idea? I often say, as you've heard me say, that the argument from design, it's not compelling or persuasive, but it does give me pause for these reasons that are being mentioned, but they're just not convincing.
Not enough on their own.
Not enough to sway me into belief.
Yeah. Enough to make you sometimes doubt your position, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I said a similar one in the sense that, sometimes I'm just in awe of things when I actually think about the planet and how it's spinning on an axis and also on a path through the sun, which itself, not through the sun, around the sun. Through the sun would be fucked. But going around the sun, it might briefly. And the sun itself is moving, and all those things, it is enough to make you go, oh well, how does this all work? This is almost beyond my comprehension, and it can lead you to go down that path. And I can understand it, of why these things that, well, you go, well, I can't explain it, so I'll explain it with God. But that isn't enough for me. I need a bit more justification on that. Atangelo, you think my disbelief is unwarranted. Dave and I did a stream on why we believe gods do not exist. And we're talking about all gods, not just your God in that regard. We're talking about global atheism rather than local atheism. there's a lot more reasons if we were probably to just speak specifically about yours. But if you want to do that and you want to leave a comment on that one, it was Why the Hell Are We Atheists Part 2. And if you want to have a conversation on that, watch the video. We talk about justification. We talk about how a lack of belief atheists can justify their position. And we talk about how Dave and I would justify our position as atheists. And that is why we believe gods do not exist. But that's not the point of this stream right now. So if you want to do it, go on and listen to those arguments. And I think you'll have to say that at least we've justified ourselves quite well. You might not agree with our justifications, but that doesn't mean we're not necessarily justified.
And I'll agree with something Chris says here. Since the universe exists and we have no actual evidence for what was before, both claims for and against gods will never end. And I agree.
Yeah, that's probably true. Unless some massive extinction level event happens and there's no more humans around. That will end
Strange absurdity to justify myth. Strange absurdity to justify myth. Atheists had to think this way because they face real problems that they can only get out of with these miserable assumptions. Here another atheist may come to tell you, perhaps in the future we will find a solution to these problems. This is called referring to the future gaps. I will disbelieve, hoping.
The irony of him talking about future gaps when he's making arguments that are essentially the God of the gaps, he's looking back and going, we don't know, therefore God. We're saying, we don't know. Something you could say here, though, and I know it is a little bit inductive, so it's not fully justified, but everything that has come to pass previously that we thought was something supernatural has been replaced by a natural explanation. So I think it's more reasonable to believe that if we're constantly replacing the supernatural with a natural explanation, that eventually we might come to terms where we can explain almost everything naturally. Maybe we will never have the technology or knowledge to explain absolutely everything. You know, maybe we won't. But I think it's more likely that we will come to the conclusion where more and more things are shown to be natural. There might be even more and more errors highlighted in the various holy books. I mean, there's already been a ton, but who knows?
Yeah. I mean, we often see things that we thought were something else explained by a natural phenomenon. So it's not that we're just going, well, it'll be explained. If you're honest, you'll say, well, I believe it will be explained eventually. I just don't trust that other explanation.
Yeah, which is fair enough. Now, there is something Cafe says here, which I quite like. I mean, obviously, Cafe's a panentheist of some regard, I think. A natural explanation isn't necessarily in conflict with God. And depending on the God that you're speaking about, I'd have to agree with you. I don't think there is.
Yeah.
It's one of the things when you speak to like young Earth creationists, I think, why can't you accept, like many other Christians do, that, you know, how the earth came to be and how life emerged on earth and how the evolution of life happened was just God's method. I think that makes sense, that it could be God's method if there was a God. I don't see why it would have to be overly complicated and we'd have to go down the whole 6,000 years route, because that's roughly how old everybody is in the Bible when you add all their ages up, and we're going to be very literal with it. So, yeah, I mean, That's perfectly fair. He also says a quote here. He says, "I'm not interested in the phenomenon or that in this phenomenon or that phenomenon." Einstein had said this early in his life. "I want to know God's thoughts. The rest are mere details." Now, Einstein himself was a pantheist, wasn't he? He essentially equated the universe with divinity. But most pantheists don't take a personal God or a fully conscious type of God in that regard either. So
yeah,
I wonder
Einstein sort of believed in Spinoza's God.
Yes. So it's not necessarily the same sort of conscious being as you'd be thinking of in that God. So when he's talking about God's thoughts there, I imagine he's talking about the mysteries of the universe. It's a more of a metaphor, though. Cafe thinks that Einstein was more accurately a panentheist, not a pantheist. I mean, I don't know that. All I know from what I have read is, as Dave said, he believed in Spinoza's God. So I'll have to check on that one and come back to you on that one, Cafe. Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
That what support my disbelief will emerge in the future. I will disbelieve because of evidence that may emerge in the future.
Yeah, you know what he was saying here? I will support my disbelief because of what will come in the future. He's again making the mistake that these are the only reasons that people disbelieve. I mean, you could remove some of these things, like you could remove not knowing what created the thing, the universe in the beginning, how the universe formed, why the universe formed, and still disbelieve in something like Allah or the Christian God or the Hindu gods or the Norse gods. You know, there are other reasons to disbelieve than what he's presenting here.
Most definitely. Although, I mean, I suppose we could be fair and say that he is focusing at this point in time on the creation of the universe, and yeah, as you say, basically the Kalam. But I still don't think that he's doing very well in presenting this case that he's got going on. I have heard many theists present a much better argument than this guy does. Yeah. Again, we're back to him preaching to the choir that already believes what he believes, so they can turn around and go, yeah, dumb atheists, they're all irrational, they don't know what they're talking about, they're unjustified, so on and so forth, without actually thinking, well, actually, here's all the justifications, and that is why it's led us to this position here. He's starting top down and going, well, they don't know, so there.
Yeah.
Emerge in the future, in which I may not be alive. Atheists of the future will commit the same fallacy, and so on. Future itself will make fun of them. It isn't logical to resort to assumptions to prevent interpretation of a phenomenon in its context that clearly indicates
pot kettle black.
Yeah.
Clearly indicates the creator. I mean, considering there are so many different takes on some form of creator or it being done by various natural means, it's hardly clear. If it was clear, everybody would believe in the same one. So he's making the assumption that it's clear. And he's making an assumption that it's his creator as well. Yeah. Sorry. I feel like it's getting a little bit more ridiculous as we go on here.
There's so much irony going on in here. You could do ironing.
It's the creator. If we at this stage and with these clear proofs refuse to believe in the creator, then at which stage shall we submit to him? And they will say, if only we had been listening or reasoning, we wouldn't be among the companions of the blaze. Wassalamu alaikum.
سبحانك ربي سبحانك.
I don't know, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, if atheists want to look for better arguments for creators, there are better arguments than this out there.
Most definitely, and I think people should check them out. And I think there are plenty of decent theistic arguments. I still don't find them convincing myself, but others might. I think there are even from to Thought Adventure podcast. If you want to take, if you want actually a good take on Islam and philosophy, I mean, that's a much better show to actually watch and consider the things they say. And they're really bright guys as well. So, I mean, if you want to hear some good arguments, they're not all as bad as this. Let me quickly just put things back into Be Right Back, and I will switch us back round. Hey, I think we're back in the room. Are we here? I might be. We should be.
There we go. Yeah, we're back up on the stream.
Excellent. Yeah, I do think this guy needs to actually spend more time. If he's going to criticize atheism, consider the building blocks that lead people to these decisions and conclusions and understandings of the universe, and actually think about why people do believe this. Don't just go, well, we don't know, so it has to be a god, and they're saying it'll be in the future, so it's a fallacy, whilst committing a fallacy himself. I'm genuinely not convinced. And we mentioned the Thought Adventure podcast as a good one to check out. There's also the Dry Apologist. He's quite a good one to check out from a Christian perspective. I'm trying to think of others off the top of my head, and I've gone
Inspiring Christendom.
Oh yes, Inspiring Christendom is a good one. Inspiring Philosophy. It's definitely worth checking out the better arguments and actually getting prepared. And if you want also to hear some good philosophy of religion from atheists, check out Real Atheology. They will be presenting you much better arguments than the standard new atheist rhetoric. Dave and I tend to shy away from theistic discussion because we generally don't feel so engaged in the topic as we used to. We spent lots of time discussing it years ago, and we tend to find it a bit dry, but we decided to cover off this video. As we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, we would do part 3, and we figured tonight is what we will do.
We were both kind of shattered today, so went with an easy route.
Yeah, I do apologize if you were expecting something a bit more. But, like last week, we did a couple of hard topics. We did artificial ethics, so the ethics of AI. And I mean, that was a 3-hour-long stream. And we still only really scratched the surface of all the little parts that we covered off because it was so big. And we'd love to have more conversations on stuff like that. I think Dave and I both love things like ethics and epistemology and other topics around that as well. And some current event stuff as well, if you give us a chance to read up on it.
Well, speaking of ethics, and here's one for Chris.
It's upside down, but the moral fool. Perfectly done, Dave. I'm going to say that was an intentional thing because you are the moral fool.
It was to engage your brain and make sure you were paying it. Honest. But yeah, that arrived yesterday.
Awesome. I'm still really far behind in my reading. I just haven't had the time. of late. I've just been so knackered. The time that I'd like to spend in bed reading something, I just go, I can't hold it. And I've been rewatching Farscape instead for about the third time. And I put it on, and I get 10 minutes into an episode, and I'm gone. So it's great. It's going to take me like 2 years to get through the entire series. Yeah, I feel almost his last video that we found loads of issues with was better than this one, which is saying something. I was hoping that this one was going to be a little bit better, but he basically started top down and went, because you can't answer this thing, therefore God, you're irrational for not saying it's God.
I noticed that it started with the bad presumption that atheists worship nature and see it as like an idol.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd forgotten that bit. It'd been wiped from my memory, Dave. Why'd you have to remind me?
Powering for life.
I would be interested to know, though, if there are any atheists out there that do actually worship nature. As I mentioned, I know some of us atheists do deify things like science. They don't necessarily view it as a deity in that regard, and they don't exactly worship it as a god, but they do put far too much power in the power of science and forget how fallible it can be, and is, and how that's why it's constantly trying to improve itself, because it realizes it's that fallible. And I hope we haven't come across that way today when we've been talking about things like science involved in what we're doing. I'm sure some people out there could have presented better and more current arguments on the various scientific things as well. I was just trying to give a counterpart to what the guy was saying and what we know and how far back we can detect with things. But yeah, I think you'd probably find more people worship beer than nature.
Yeah. Or Aaron Ra.
Yeah. I mean, again, there are some really bad atheist takes, and people who do seem to look up to certain people in the atheist community that don't necessarily have the best takes on things, and defend them just because of who they are, rather than actually reconsidering the position. I do find it interesting, though. I would like at some point to have a conversation between people like Atangelo and Cafe and their different takes on God, because they have a very, very different idea of what God is. And I'd like also a Muslim to be in there to take their take, and a pagan to be in there and actually have a round table discussion of people trying to justify why their God is the right God and what they can actually base that on. I think that sort of conversation would be really interesting to me. I'd like to sit back and just let that one happen and listen in. Maybe occasionally ask the odd question. So if all of you are up for that, I'd like to do that sometime. I'd like to learn a bit more about why you believe what you believe. I'm sure you'd like a chance to present your case as well. Although I wouldn't want it in debate format. I'd want it in roundtable discussion format. So if you can't behave, then don't come.
Yeah. If you're just looking for an argument in a shouting match, I'm really not interested in anything like that.
No, we'd shut down that conversation pretty quickly.
And yeah, we're British, so we can be kind of sharp in our insults.
It's because we're all wankers, really. So.
Yeah. A bit of a shout out here for a channel called Axioms on Trial. If you want to have a look at Tangelo's discussion, I think he's been on there having a discussion with Cease to Know and J Mike, or just Cease to Know. I can't remember now. It was a while back.
What was that one again?
Axioms on Trial.
Axioms on Trials. I'm not. Oh, I keep mistyping. I think I've got the caps lock on. Axioms on Trial. I was just gonna put that into the thing I've been playing with today. So check out Axioms on Trial. Go on, show it. There it is. I just wanted that to come up on the screen. I should have done it a lot quicker. But you know what? Now that that's there, I can quickly change that for any recommendations in the future.
Nice one. Well, Cease to Know of Axioms on Trial is just finishing up his Masters in Philosophy.
Oh, awesome. I bet that was really interesting then. He obviously knows his stuff. Does he know it as well as you, though, Dave?
Probably better. I'm not that bright. I only got a distinction. You know, that's not very good.
Yeah. There's a lot more chat going on in the chat, talking about different takes on God. Cafe saying that Atangelo's understanding of God's akin to his own, and Atangelo's disagreeing. But yeah, that's and he's talking about how he had a debate at the plot hole. So there's another one. If you want to check the plot hole and you are more interested in debates rather than actual conversations, then that's one for you all to check out. I mean, personally, I'm not a fan of the debate format myself. I find that they tend to become shouty matches.
Yeah.
And people just going, I'm right. No, I'm right. No, I'm right.
Debates are generally performed for a crowd of clapping seals.
And as I said, I'd much rather have a conversation or listen to a conversation. So I'll put the offer out there again. If there are a few people, perhaps in a few weeks' time, of a variety of different faiths and non-faith positions that would like to just have a chat on stream, I'd be very interested into listening to what any of you have to say and any of your justifications for your position. It'd be really interesting to me. Hopefully it'd be interesting to some of our viewers as well. Dave, is there anything you wanted to cover off before we finish up for the night?
Nope, that seems pretty good.
Awesome. Well, in that case, I will just remind everybody that our stream times are Tuesday and Thursday at 8:30 p.m. GMT. That's 3:30 p.m. Eastern. We tend to discuss philosophical topics. We occasionally dip our toes into religion, but we think there are far more interesting things to discuss. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Answers in Reason, and if you'd like to follow Dave, it is at TrolleyDave1971. You can also check us out on Facebook. We have a page and a group. Just search for Answers in Reason. And of course, there's our website, answersinreason.com. I hope you enjoyed the video. I really thank everybody who put their comments into the chat as well. It made for a bit more engagement. And there are some things that I need to think on and come back to at a later date. So hopefully you'll all be back in the future and we will discuss that again. I'd also like to thank everybody who is catching the rerun of this and anybody who is listening to the podcast. I do apologize that you can't see the things on screen, but feel free to join us in the future for another sci-fi stream. You've been watching the Fresh Air Sci-Fi Show. I'm Joe.
And I'm Sleepy Dave.
And it's time for us to go to bed.
Good night, all.
Good night, everyone.